Joining me now, the Veterans Affairs Minister, Erin O'Toole. Good to see you, Minister.
Thanks for having me.
So this is something that lots of people have been calling for, including the Veterans Ombudsman himself. 406 vets at risk of not having sufficient retirement income once it stops at 65. This closes a big gap, I guess. Why didn't it happen before now?
The Ombudsman did identify this group that he said 406 2 years ago. The Parliamentary Committee last year also looked at it. What we've launched today, Rosie, is actually a broader package that impacts those 406, provides them with protection, but actually far more. So the benefit is called the Retirement Income Program, and it will provide security once they hit 65. So they were receiving earning loss benefit and some permanent impairment benefits. Yeah. But when that earning loss, which was the income supplement for those that couldn't transition into employment, when that dropped off, they would see a massive decrease. So this new benefit, the security benefit, will top that back up so that they have peace of mind into their retirement.
Why did you need to create a new package? Why not just extend the earning loss benefit that was already in place until to a different age?
Well, the earnings loss benefit is meant to be an income replacement as people transition and do the rehabilitation. So for veterans that aren't as severely injured as this group we're trying to assist today, this payment is meant to provide income to the veteran and their family as they do rehabilitation. So each veteran, there's potentially up to $75,000 spent on the rehabilitation process. This income is to make sure that they have income coming in as they do education, as they do retraining. But with this cohort of our more moderately to severely injured, we know that they won't be able to transition as easy as someone with less serious injuries. Therefore, the ELB, the earnings loss, became really just part of the overall package of benefits. The other part of my announcement today, which I think is important for veterans, rather than have earnings loss, permanent impairment allowance, supplement, what I've asked the department to do is to try and streamline all of these for our most seriously injured into a pension for life for our most seriously injured. That will reduce the complexity. It will also provide more certainty.
What's the timeline on that then?
I've asked the department to try and bring this forward in the coming months. The most important thing we're bringing forward would be legislation to have this new benefit passed right away. All parties agreed last year in the Standing Committee report. This was one of their recommendations, so I take it that the NDP and the Liberals that supported this recommendation, if they can give swift passage of this legislation, we want to have by July this benefit in place, even though it will really start impacting people at 2020 outward, because a lot of the Afghanistan veterans that were seriously injured aren't 65 yet, but they'll start. We'll have 200 receiving it by 2020, so we need to move now.
This would allow for 70%, I think, of income, is that right?
70% of income that they had the previous year from benefits.
So why not higher? Because the Ombudsman suggested 100%, if I'm not mistaken, 90 to 100%. Why not bring it up higher? Why did you have to settle at 70%?
Well, if you look at the series of packages, there are a series of benefit payments. If you take a corporal that is seriously injured like this, they will receive earnings loss benefit, they'll receive the permanent impairment, there's 2 allowances for that. In the short term after their injury, some make more than 100% of their previous salary. What this needs to do is to make sure that there's a plan. So there's no drop off at 65, so that they can plan for that. So like many pensions, and that's really where this is going, pension, it's 70% of where they were before they retired. Now we're using retired as the 65 threshold because it was what the Ombudsman recognized, knowing that many of these veterans will continue to rehabilitate and focus on their wellness, but may not actually be working.
I'm not sure you answered the question though. Why not go all the way up to 100%? Is it just fiscally not possible, or you feel like there are other things that cover off that gap? What's the problem there?
This should meet the need, because if you're looking at many pensions, 70% of what they were making before 65 is something that is healthy and something they can plan for. Some of the more moderately injured can have other income sources in those years before 65. So somebody who is a young Afghan veteran at 35 now, the sincere hope is that they'll recover. But if they're seriously injured, they now know they have predictability at 65.
What about dependents or survivors as they are defined? Do they continue to receive this package even if the veteran passes away? Yes?
So if the service member post 65 does pass away, there is a survivability clause for the spouse, which is in line with most pensions of this nature, which is a 50% payment.
Okay.
So it specifically took into consideration families, and this is part of the planning anyone needs to do, particularly if you have injuries in the home.
So, I mean, you know that the report came out in 2013. This is the first sort of significant response from the government. What took so long to, I know you weren't the minister all that time, but it's the same government. What took so long to get anything done? Well,
last year the Standing Committee did put the report out, and there was a number of recommendations. We moved on some. Some of them required fiscal capacity to do, and we've worked on that. Others will require legislative change, including this benefit. So we've spent time, particularly my first 2 months as minister, has been spent working on coming legislation for this benefit, and to make sure that we reached out to stakeholders to say, here's where we're going. I identified this, Rosie, as probably the biggest gap because the Ombudsman articulated it. The all-party committee confirmed this last year. This was a priority for me and what I wanted to move on first.
There's lots of other ones there, though, too, that you haven't decided to go after. Are those to come?
Well, you'll have to have me back to talk. I have a lot of things I want to work on, and I think once people recognize that the Liberals brought in the new Veteran Charter, we've implemented it. There's been some gaps identified. We fixed the first gap in 2011 when we brought in the Permanent Impairment Allowance Supplement. This new retirement income security benefit will fix the gap at 65. And there's other areas where we need to address some areas that the new Veterans Charter could do better, and we're committed to that.
This particular one says that you'll examine things on a case-by-case basis. So is it dependent on the nature of the injury, or how do you make a determination as to how this will unfold?
It's actually dependent really on the veteran themselves. So there could be a veteran that was seriously injured in their late 30s and 40s that have a pension from the Canadian Armed Forces, because you could earn a pension for, in some cases, in 20 years. So this is about providing income security for folks that don't have these other sources of income post 65. So if somebody has a Canadian Forces pension that helps make them whole when the earnings loss benefit drops off, they won't be caught by this. This is to catch folks.
They won't need as much.
They won't, exactly. Yeah. In the case of Afghanistan, we had a number of young people come forward to serve in war that may not have had pensionable time. This will certainly take care of them. That's what the Ombudsman identified, but this will actually be broader to provide sort of planning for families.
You recently announced that amputees are no longer to have to annually verify their condition for the level of support they need. However, they do have to still do it once every 3 years. Why is this happening still? I mean, lots of people were outraged that someone would have to justify needing this support every year. It still seems a bit strange that someone would need to justify it every 3 years. Why not just get rid of it?
We're working to make sure that there's no burdens like this on anyone with a serious injury. But what the intention of the department was this home care benefit, VIP it's called, there was a renewal. The forms were meant to ask about the wellness of the veteran, have their needs changed, but they were clumsy, bureaucratic, and if somebody's struggling with recovery from injuries like that, we should have language that's clear in what we're doing. So I've taken that case. I said clearly, no one will ever have to verify lost limbs in the future.
Every year, but they will have to verify
Well,
them.
the challenge is they were renewing the program each year.
Right.
Now I've instantly said, everyone, there's no renewal for 3 years. What I'd like to do is that folks with a permanent impairment like that, if they have a case manager, the case manager should be able to take care of all these types of renewals. But more importantly, I've struck a task force within Veterans Affairs. I want every letter that we send to a veteran and their family to be redrafted. Because I've talked to families, even a letter appearing at the house causes stress. It should be written so that it's easy to understand and that it shows that it's focused on their wellness. What we
So this
learned,
kind of question, sort of crass question, won't be asked again of someone like that.
Absolutely. This is what we've learned from Mr. Franklin's case, is a letter like this, particularly every year, even though it had good intentions, was actually impacting his wellness. How can we make this, how can we eliminate it for our more seriously injured, permanently impaired veterans, but even folks with more moderate injuries that get this home care type benefit? How can we streamline it, make it less cumbersome, and make sure the correspondence at least takes into fact that this may be received by somebody with mental injuries, with physical injuries. It needs to be written with their wellness at the center of it.
Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. Keep us posted.
Thank you.